Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, it is Thursday, July 28th, 2022 at 5 p.m. And this special meeting will now come to order. Everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Bankert.
Present.
Councilmember Leslie Notero.
Here.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Shirley.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Zabel.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glenn Gunn.
Here.
Mayor Dave Gaddis.
Here.
Interim City Manager Kyle Riefler.
Here.
City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present. Thank you very much, Patty. Present. Randy, are you able to hear us?
Yes, sir, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. All right. We have one item on our agenda tonight, and that is for final candidate interviews and selection. Before we get started, I'd like everyone to know that we are not hiring a city manager tonight. It's also important to know that Mr. Daniels has taken another job closer to home and is no longer interested. Our only candidate tonight is now Mr. Griffin. If this council selects Mr. Griffin, please be aware that this will only move us into the negotiations phase of the process, and he is not officially hired until the city and Mr. Griffin reach a workable agreement. As we interview Mr. Griffin, I would advise each of you to not be afraid to ask the hard questions, including expected salary and benefits. Once the interview is completed, Mr. Griffin will be asked to leave the room for council discussion. Once we finish discussions, he will be brought back into the room and we will vote. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. All right, let's begin. Welcome, Mr. Griffin. Would you like to please step up and go ahead and give some introductory statement for us?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed talking with each of you. Got the opportunity to not only read about the city and your strategic plan and your visions for the city, but also a little bit about each of you. And I'm truly honored to be here. You each have impressive backgrounds, successful careers, and it's an honor to talk with you. I love municipal work. A tremendous amount. It's basically been my full career, except for more recently as a consulting engineer. I love the opportunity to make the public facilities, public environment, make the city better. I love doing it in the forum of you, the council, sets the priorities in consultation with input from the citizens, and we move forward and we put in place improvements in process, in operations, in facilities, and amenities that serve the public well and make our community stronger, more viable, continue to maintain its great quality of life and the place to live and work and play. That's what makes me happy, is to implement your visions for the city, to see our citizens enjoy those benefits, the things they've asked for to be achieved.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. I'm going to ask you just to stay right up there, and I would like to go right into questions from the council.
Sure.
So let's start with Mr. Banker, who is his own position.
Good evening, Mr. Griffin, and thank you for attending.
And Mr. Baker,
Looking over your resume and your job application, are you willing to take a substantial wage cut, which you're currently earning right now, to take this job?
I prefer not to. I have a nice package where I work. You see my compensation there, which is exclusive of benefits and bonuses, and I would hope not to take a significant cut.
And the, one other question is, you've been with Wagner since 2016?
Wagner and its predecessor, Reynolds Engineering, yes.
Yes. And then it seems like you jumped around a little bit year to year before that?
That's right. My wife is a PhD psychologist and had a wonderful career opportunity in Virginia, in Williamsburg, Virginia, where our daughter lives. And I encouraged her to take that opportunity, and I would do the best I could to get as close to her as I could, as soon as I could. So that was a little more difficult than I thought. It involved a number of moves, but it worked out well, and I wound up very close to her. And then her opportunity with that same firm has brought her back to Florida, and she's practicing in Florida now.
So she's still working and she could be relocated someplace else?
She is still working here in Florida. She's still counseling. She's a psychologist here. She mostly counsels online though.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Next up, let's call on Mike Sable.
Okay, I just want to correct the record. By the way, welcome Dr. Griffin. I use your PhD very freely. What would be your priorities be for the first 3 months, 6 months, and first year?
My priorities would be your priorities, the priorities of our citizens. I think you have it fairly covered well in the things that you've discussed recently and in your strategic plan. The one item I might mention to you that I think is important is with Senate Bill 1941 passing last year, that requires a vulnerability assessment for each waterfront community. I would suggest it would be important to complete that. There is funding that would pay for that. And then once that's complete, then you're eligible for a very substantial amount of grant dollars that the governor's made available to implement any improvements you need to make your community fully resilient with climate change.
So briefly, how would you go about applying for those extra dollars that we don't have in the budget?
I would take the lead certainly in doing that application. I have the ability to do that.
Thank you.
Jody Shirley.
Well, you took my thunder, that was, I have one question. Yeah, you, in your opening statements, you said that you reviewed our mission of the city, and I wanted to know what would be your number one priority. I know you just expounded on one item, but what else? I mean, from a city standpoint, you see what our mission is, so tell me what you took out of that review.
Well, I think what each of you ran on, I think you had your priorities well lasered, well focused, and those priorities are a more collaborative, congenial atmosphere in terms of how business is conducted, and I think protecting and enhancing the quality of life for the shoreline, and all that means in terms of rules and regulations and negotiations with adjacent communities. I would think those are some of the priorities. And as I mentioned, I think it's important to get quickly on the training for vulnerability assessment. That's a training that's being pushed for the last year. And we're going to take advantage of the opportunities that are there and make sure that we've protected the community in the way that needs to be done so that we don't have any negative effects.
Anything else?
I know you guys covered this a little bit in the previous interview, but when I look through your resume, it's pretty impressive. You have a lot of education, but I don't see a lot of practical experience when it comes to being a city manager.
Okay. Well, a number of answers to that. First of all, besides being a department head for public works and public utilities earlier in my career, and city engineer earlier in my career, I've been head of the largest water agency in Mississippi. It was also the largest developer in Mississippi. And we operated a 45-mile-long reservoir and developed 50 communities, 50 park and recreation facilities, and all the supporting infrastructure in cooperation with the private sector. So in that role, I was operating just like the city manager of a medium-sized city, population of about 16,000, budget of about 15 million at the time. Of course, we had significant capital needs, and I was fortunate to secure over $50 million in external funding, grant funding appropriations for our community. We were the government, we were the municipality for our 16,000 residents. Following that, I was Assistant County Administrator for Hillsborough County, in charge of all the physical side of the county, public works, public utilities, solid waste, community code enforcement, and planning and growth management. And so that was in an assistant role, but for all of those planning and hard sides of municipal work. I've been a county administrator for King William County in Virginia, a small county of about 14,000 in suburban Richmond, Virginia. And I handled all departments, 100 employees that we had operating that full service county, and personally handled public utilities myself.
But no experience in beachfront communities or anything like that, just the waterworks would bring you closest.
Well, certainly Hillsborough County has got significant holdings, on the water, and we had significant waterfront issues. The 13 years I served as the general manager of the Pearl River Valley Water Supply District in Mississippi, we had significant shoreline beachfront development issues, maintenance issues. We had quite a few public beaches that we operated and maintained. I'm quite familiar with that. I'm a civil engineer. I'm trained in the water area specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd Roberts.
Hi, Ken. Good to finally be able to see you, and I appreciate the fact that you did send us a picture. So that was good. I enjoyed the interview we had via Zoom. I guess it was a week ago.
I did too. Thank you.
Good. So let's say it's tomorrow, Friday, and you're meeting with one of your best friends after work. Meeting at one of your favorite places. We'll just call him Bill. And Bill says, "Hey Ken, since you confided in me of your interest in another opportunity," and you explained to him, city manager, Pillar Beach, and so he asked you, what's your real motivation for wanting to potentially leave the current position you're in now, which is a pretty good one, and move on to this new opportunity of a smaller town. So what's your real motivation, friend to friend?
Well, that's an excellent way to phrase it. I think maybe trying to answer a little more fully to what I mentioned earlier on. If you look at my career, it's been in public service except for the last 5 years, working with a consulting firm. What I've always enjoyed is working with the council, working with the citizens, and putting those improvements in plans, policies, procedures, facilities, putting those in place, and then seeing the citizens, the residents enjoy those measures, those improvements, those facilities. That's what makes me smile. And I've been blessed to be very successful in securing the kind of grant funding that it takes to make those things happen. In my career, I've secured over $130 million to make those improvements happen because they're always very expensive.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
But that's what makes me smile, when I can see our citizens riding their bikes, pushing their carriages, strolling on our sidewalks, on our beaches that are in good shape and well maintained, taken care of, safe. That makes me smile.
Excellent.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yes, sir. I was looking through your public administrator positions in King William County. I went online, it says a population of 17,800. I think you said 16,000, but in any way, it's considerably larger than the population of Bel Air Beach. Bel Air Beach is unique in that it's a small,
Right.
totally residential community. How do you see, shall I say, adapting to that environment?
You know, actually, I see it being very much the same. That sounds like a big population. It's a large county, extremely rural, even though it was suburban Richmond. Very small staff covering every single area was only 100. I know the staff here is smaller, but for a county of that size and covering every area of public service that a county provides, I did a lot of the work myself. For instance, I did all the public utility work. I was the public utility director and basically the only employee. So it's hands-on work. It's work you get to do yourself, and so that's kind of a nice opportunity. Not only do you get to try to develop solutions to problems, but you get to be part of actually physically implementing them, and keeps one honest. So I enjoy that.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Gunn.
Thank you very much for joining us. Very impressive resume. You've done a lot, or have you just been around a long time?
Maybe a little bit of both.
I'm being facetious. One thing I noticed is that with such a strong engineering background, you made the leap to a PhD in management and leadership. And I guess I'm kind of interested in what that brought on, or why the life change, or...
Excellent question. A couple of reasons. One is, as an engineer, I think a couple of you may well understand this, your coursework is full of technical courses. But if you're good as an engineer, you very quickly move to a management position. But you get to do that without having any leadership or management courses. So that was one of the reasons. I realized I was moving in this direction in a management capacity, and I really wanted some training in how to do that job well, how to do that job state of the art. And so it's one of the reasons I went back. The other reason was it was right there in Jackson, Mississippi. Our community of 16,000 was just in suburban Jackson, Mississippi. University of Mississippi offered a program that I could take right there in Jackson and only have to be on campus for 3 summers. So I had to drive a lot for 3 summers, but otherwise I had a relatively short drive. I guess the other last thing to tell you is that when I went to Cornell and got my master's in limnology, that's study of lakes and streams and reservoirs, freshwater, chemistry, biology, physics, etc. I felt bad that I decided to leave and not get a PhD. I had the opportunity to, I had a full scholarship, could have stayed as long as I needed to do that. But I realized I didn't want to be a researcher. I realized I wanted to be hands-on. I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to run agencies the way that took care of problems correctly. And so I stopped at the master's level. But I always felt bad about that. So when things came together and I had this opportunity and it made sense to get a PhD, I jumped on it right away. And very pleased that I did. Got to work with the Dean of the School of Engineering after I finished, and we developed a management track for engineers getting their master's at the University of Mississippi. And I taught in that program for a while. And I guess the final blessing was that in this program, this PhD program, I met my wife. And we've been married ever since.
So most of the jobs or positions you've held, you've had some sort of boss line covered for you. You've had some large staffs, done some large interrelational stuff with other departments and stuff like that. But My question is, so your experience is a lot of PhD stuff, and you've done some of that stuff in your jobs with the other departments and positions you've held, but you're about to jump into the political fray now. And my question to you is, do you feel like you have the experience and you're ready to be the guy who sometimes there's no pleasing everybody? You're being pushed from every side, everybody's got an opinion, everybody's going to try to tell you how to do your job. Are you ready and assertive enough to say, thank you, I've got it, and I know how to do this?
I'm very comfortable and experienced with that. Pretty my whole life, I've worked directly for a council, a commission, a board. The 13 years I was the general manager of the agency in Mississippi I mentioned, I reported directly to a 14-person board, highly political. That board represented 5 counties and 4 state agencies. I took a lead role as an assistant county administrator in Hillsborough County. The county administrator, Pat Bean, had each of us ACAs very actively involved with the city council on all issues that fall in our area. Certainly as county administrator for King William County, I reported directly to a 5-person board, tremendously political environment in that area with the battle between the different political persuasions that existed in that part of Virginia. So I'm very comfortable with that. And I recognize the job that you have. You each have a very difficult job. And you bring different experiences and different wisdom to each challenge that you face, each problem that you face. And my job is to follow your direction, the direction of the full council. And I know in doing so, you might have a vote that's 4-3 to go in one direction. When I do that, I realize that maybe the 3 that didn't want to go in that direction won't be happy, even though I'm following the overall council's direction. I'm used to that. But I try to find a way to meet all the council members' needs. I try to find a way to say yes, to solve problems the way that they need to be solved. And I've been successful doing that. I'm comfortable doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for you. Looking at your resume, I see that your current position is substantially higher than what we paid our previous city manager. Can you tell me exactly how you would be able to fully justify if we hired you at your current salary? I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but that's what you're implying you would like to make happen. What would you do for the city of Bel Air Beach to justify that type of pay?
That's a very good question. And two answers for that. One is, certainly being a small city, we can't afford to be hiring consultants, like I get hired now, to do work, to make applications, to do designs, to develop plans. Those dollars, $10,000, $20,000 goes just like that. Those contracts are typically much larger than that. So I can save a tremendous amount in that regard, avoid a lot of costs that you might otherwise have to incur if you were using consultants to assist you with some major initiatives. Second of all, if you're successful in those initiatives, that usually involves money to implement them. And that gets extremely expensive, especially compared to the budget that we're facing and the capital budget that you have. And so I have a strong track record of securing outside funding, grants and appropriations, partnerships that would be many times over what my salary would be. So I mentioned to you, for the agency that I led in Mississippi for 13 years, secured over $50 million, almost $55 million for that agency. It was about a $15 million annual operating budget agency. When I took the position, I was in upstate New York, leading an electric water and wastewater utility there. Board president called me up 3 days afterwards, after I had already accepted the job, and he said, you know, there's something we haven't told you. A couple things we haven't told you. One is we're not doing anything. We have no plans, policies, procedures. We have no vision. We want you to develop a very ambitious strategic plan and vision for us in all areas of our operations, and do that in cooperation with us and our residents. And number two is we're broke. Our entire capital budget for all aspects of essentially a full-service city was $200,000. Wouldn't pay a single roadway. So he says, we need you to develop this attractive vision, strategic plan, and then find the money to implement it. And if you talk with him, Earl Walker, he'll tell you that we did exactly that. We developed a series of very ambitious, worthwhile strategic plans, and then found the money and implemented every single one of them. And our residents and citizens were extremely happy. They were shocked how well things went and how quickly things improved.
That's great. As you know, Bel Air Beach has no commerce to speak of, and we're definitely not the place for low-income housing. The combination of those two factors being removed from our city many times disqualifies us from grants because they're trying to push the economy or housing. So, what type of grants would you pursue if you were our city manager?
What's happened in Florida the last couple of years is they've made a tremendous number of grant dollars available in different programs for stormwater, for resiliency, for drainage, for flood protection, for community radio service improvements. So the opportunities are there like they never have been before. And I think it's the right way to go. The governor and the legislature have led the state in the right way. And many communities are fully embracing that and making really great things happen. And so I think we would qualify well for those. Those don't come, as far as I know, with those limitations. Because you're right, those limitations are very hard to address.
Thank you. Let's go back to Councilmember Banker.
I have no further questions.
All right. Back to Mike Sable.
Sure. I kind of understand where you're coming from. I was a commissioner in Prince George's County, so up in Maryland, so I understand what you're fighting against down in your county. But got a pretty pointed question. We have a young man, Kyle, that's filling in right now, and he has solid experience, but what we really need is somebody to mentor and lead him. And I see your experience and background in mentoring. How would you go about, developing a mentoring plan for him, for having him milestones, overall career movement? How would you go about doing that?
Well, the same way that I've done that, in other situations, and I have training in that, result of the PhD work that I did in human resource development. I guess first of all, it starts by saying that I'm not going to be here forever. I do expect to serve a significant amount of time to meet your needs, and so I think that Kyle is not going to have to wait that long. And so now's a good time to work to move things forward for Kyle. And it starts by sitting down and listening to Kyle in terms of what his interests are, his strengths, where he would like to go, how he would like to grow. I do it in an intelligent way, reviewing the products he's produced and his resume and his background. And we cooperatively work together and develop a plan for how he can grow. I'm a real believer in continuous growth and improvement, and You know, I've taken additional training and courses and certification my whole life. And here in Florida, being a highly regulated state, we really need to do that. We really need to keep current. Things are changing so quickly, especially on the stormwater and flood control side in Florida. So I think there's lots of opportunity for growth, and Kyle can become a true expert and true leader and be your next person if that's what you'd like to have.
Thank you. Councilmember Shirley.
So just a couple of questions where you keep referencing Florida. I'm really having a hard time piecing together your timeline. How long have you lived in Florida? I mean, it looks like you were here from 2006 to 2011, and you were gone for a while, and then you're back.
That's right. We bought our house when I came to Hillsborough County. I bought the house in Tampa on Harbor Island in 2006. I've kept the house ever since, and I've kept that as my permanent residence. We in 2011, we took the opportunity that allowed my wife to join a very prestigious private practice in Virginia, and that's when I went to South Carolina. But we've been back now for a good period of time.
When did you move back?
We came back in 2016.
2016, okay. To now, you never...
That's right.
Okay. I have a pretty strong background in the nonprofit world, and it's not unusual to hire someone, pay them a little more than what we have in the budget, and say, you go find the rest of your salary, you go out and raise money, which it sounds like your answer on the grants was part of that, right, to help solve some of the shortfall in the funds. But when you're seeking grants, it's typically helpful to be politically connected in Tallahassee and DC. Do you have any connections in those two areas?
Yes, I do, and to some extent, I might very selectively want to rely on some folks that I know that hire them to assist me in some of those efforts to make sure that we're successful. That would be a very minor expenditure. But yes, I do have good contacts in the county, in the region, and with the state.
Thank you.
But you're exactly right. The game is played technically and politically.
That's right.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes, so Ken, I know on your application, you had mentioned your salary plus bonuses. I'm familiar with how that works typically. Could you share with everybody normally, like maybe give us a one-year example? Clearly it's based on the success of your company normally. How does that work?
And especially based on your role in the success of the company. But in a good year, when the company's done well and you've done well for the company, your bonuses could be 15% in that range. I'm not looking for that to be part of what we're negotiating. I would like not to take a cut in terms of actual salary.
All right, that's fair. And I would like to just make a couple of statements. As you know, I'm a civil engineer as well. And one of the best compliments I think I would ever receive as I was progressing and I would meet somebody for the first time, and through conversation they would find out I was an engineer, and typically they would say something like, golly, you don't really talk or act like an engineer, which I considered a compliment. And I can tell already from listening to you speak and your experience and how you handle things that I think you would receive that same compliment. You typically have the technical expertise, but I think you also bring to the table, and hopefully to our city, the ability to be able to interact with our citizens in a way that's not typically associated with an engineering personality. And I'm confident you will. So
I understand you exactly, and yeah, I've been fortunate to get a similar compliment. I think it helps to have come from the background I came from. As I started as a biologist, a chemist, getting a degree, a master's in limnology, and so I come at it as a scientist who went back to school and got the engineering degrees, and then decided that I needed to be a better leader and manager, and got some more training in that way. So Yeah, I'm blessed to have that, and in the public forum, you better have the ability to listen and come up with alternative solutions and find a way to get them in place.
Thank you.
Councilmember Natarian.
I have no further questions.
Vice Mayor Dunn.
Let's circle back to grants for just a moment. It seems like one of the pushback we've always had when we seek grants is the financial demographics of Miller Beach. Because when you try to factor into that big formula of how they divvy out the grant money, we typically come up wanting because we don't meet the needs of the financial structure. It kind of favors the lower financial demographics. So there's a challenge there for you. Is that a surmountable hurdle?
Yeah, I'm thinking that, what I'm seeing the real push now, which is on, flood prevention, hurricane prevention, stormwater problems, which are enormously complex in terms of the physics and the chemistry, the coastal resiliency. They don't know, those problems don't notice income levels. And so the grants that, these problems need to be addressed, need to be planned for, need to be addressed, and they're not income related. Maybe it's difficult in some other things. We might say we want to get a downtown grant, rehabilitation grant. We don't have a downtown, but we might have, if we were applying for something like that, that would be maybe difficult. If we're looking for, maybe a grant to build a trail, we might have difficulty competing with that because we don't have the right economic demographics. But I don't think we're going to be doing too much of that.
You are an ICMA credentialed city manager.
That's
What does that bring to the game for us?
That's good. That's a good question. Well, it certainly requires the right education, training, and the training is continual. It's quite substantial, the continuing education requirements that you have to complete and document. And significant experience requirements where you move through the process and become fully credentialed. There's a very significant code of ethics that we all must abide by. There are tremendous resources that are provided literally daily to city managers by ICMA. And numerous publications and online notices that provide you with all the resources you could possibly need to address any problem. And so you're addressing difficult problems that maybe you haven't dealt with before, and you can quickly see how other communities like you have successfully addressed them. And so it's a tremendous resource. The city managers are not only very active in their continuing education, but they're also very active in helping each other. They get tremendously involved in publishing, presenting, making available the solutions that they've implemented to difficult problems.
In one previous position, you initiated and implemented a management dashboard with
Yes,
key performance indicators, metrics, right?
that's right.
One of the things we struggle with is we don't know if we're getting better or if we're getting worse. So what sort of metrics for a small municipality like this would you envision?
Well, I would do it, area by area, discipline by discipline. We might take parks, and we might then, together with the citizens, develop what those metrics, those meaningful metrics might be for our parks, for instance. I probably could develop that and give you a proposal, a suggestion. How about these metrics? And here's some other metrics that you might consider, and see if you like those metrics. And then once you decide what metrics you like, we adopt those. We develop a mechanism in place where we collect the data for those metrics, and then we develop a mechanism to share and present those metrics so that you and the citizens and all our employees can see those.
Are metrics something you believe in, or was that just forced on you by management?
Well, I think that's where you really want to work with the citizens, with the employees, with the council, and come up with metrics that are truly meaningful. If I operated in a vacuum, especially about some areas that I didn't know all that well, I could certainly come up with some poor metrics. And you're right, municipalities have come up with some poor metrics.
Thank you.
And then we're chasing our tail and not getting done what needs to get done.
Okay, with your vast knowledge and experience, you take that and you couple it with the fact that city managers are in high demand in Pinellas County. What's the attraction? What makes you want to work with Bel Air Beach? As small as we are, it seems like you would be bored after a while.
Well, you know, that one is you're close. Two is I really do enjoy a beachfront community. I certainly have passion for that. I live on the water myself in Tampa and Harbor Island. I think it'd be hard to be bored because there's not that many of us to do the work. So I have plenty of work to do and plenty of challenging problems to try to suggest solutions to. So I don't see that boring at all.
So you would be a hands-on city manager?
I think you have no choice with, you know, given the size of our staff and the size of our budget. I think that's what you would expect. That's what I would expect.
Thank you. Let's go back to Frank Maynard. Do you have any questions?
Our previous city manager and our interim city manager, they get right out into it. They go out into it, sometimes doing landscaping. They both worked endless hours filling sandbags during hurricane season. Is that something that you would get into too?
Yes. That's part of being dedicated to what needs to be done. You need to, and plus, as you mentioned, the manpower is needed.
That's it.
Councilmember Zabel.
Okay, Doctor and citizens, I just want to be clear here. When we became elected, we wanted to make sure that we assured the citizens that we would accomplish all due diligence. We would do our homework. To this point, it may seem short that there's only a few questions each, but I need to reiterate, tonight's really the culmination of work by a committee. They reviewed each and every resume. We worked with them to compile a way to rank the resumes. We then, each of us, read all the resumes, read the backgrounds, and ranked that. This is not the first time we've been in front. We've had a session prior to this where we asked and answered many questions. I mean, myself, I'm just tattling along over, 12 very specific questions that you have answered truthfully, up front, and in great detail. Showing us that these accomplishments that you've had, the resumes are available, just amazing. Wanted to thank you for that, but I just wanted to, again, make that very clear to the citizens that this is just not a one-night standard, that we've done an enormous amount of work to get to this point. Having said that, I have no further questions of you. Thank you very much, Doctor.
I realize that, and I know I applied back in late April. I think I checked in with Patty once to make sure that something hadn't gone wrong, and Patty told me they are working very hard and be patient. And I said, happily so.
I want to, yes, definitely with that. And I want to also reiterate one simple thing, but it means a lot to me. It's, you were frankly the only candidate that came back with a thank you note, appreciating, our time as a council and as a city for the time that we spent with you last time we met. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I realize the hours that each of you put in. It's a very demanding job, and I can tell from what you had talked about when you were running for office that you were serious, each of you were serious about doing the job, and you knew what the job involved and the hours it took to do it. I've been in this kind of job long enough where I see how hard a good board, a good council works. And when a good council works with a good city manager, it's amazing the things that you can get done. And then we all celebrate, we all smile.
Thank you. Councilmember Shirley.
Yeah, this is more just a statement, and, Glenn had I'm not sure if it was Glenn's question, but how would you justify your salary? And you went through a list of things, and one of the things you said was, we're spending money on engineering consultants and that sort of thing. I just want to be clear, we're hiring a city manager, not an engineer. We appreciate your experience and knowledge, and I'm sure we'll pull from that quite a bit, but not to get sideways, and that we rely on you for engineering, because that's not what you're hired for. So, I just want to kind of clear the air there, because we've had some situations in the past that professionals thought they could use their professional credentials to assist the council, and that wasn't what they were on council to do. So, and I just thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to get to meet you, because I wasn't on the call, but thank you again for your time.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the good questions tonight.
Councilmember Roberts.
So if we get to the point where everything is, we've offered you a position and we've negotiated everything that needs to be negotiated, at that point, how much time notice do you think you will have to give, or you want to give to your current employer?
Something on the order of 2 to 4 weeks, I'm thinking about.
Thank you, and again, thank you. I won't have any more questions, but thank you so much for your time, and your answers have been very thorough, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I get to talk to 3 engineers, looks like, tonight. At least 3.
Councilmember Notaro.
I have no further questions.
Vice Mayor Gunn.
You're a technology guy, so I'm just kind of curious. Yours is the only application that's handwritten, and when we tried to do a Zoom meeting the other night, we seemed to have difficulty, so I'm just kind of wondering what's going on there.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm a little old-fashioned, and I was taught early in my career that if you want your application to stand out, you do it by hand. I have pretty good printing, still have pretty good printing. Earlier in my career, I used to, before we had computers, I used to actually letter our drawings myself and didn't have to use any guides to do the lettering. So I just have kind of always gotten in the habit of printing.
Okay, thank you for that. And one last question is, it revolves around the salary. I mean, you're a well-compensated guy out there in the engineering consulting world. And let's do a thought experiment here for a second. You're sitting up here looking at hiring the next city manager, and obviously you're budget constrained. So the question revolves around what is a real-world possibility is, we're looking for best value, and there's no problem in hiring a person who's going to bring back a return on the city's investment in salary and wages and compensation. That's no problem. But the question is are we going to get our money's worth in our return? How do we ensure that? So would it be out of the question for a city council to think about some sort of pay structure where we had the ability to observe for a period of time and compensate with a bonus to catch you up to where you are? I'm not expecting you to tip your hand for negotiation purposes, but I'm just saying, is that a real world consideration for the people sitting up here?
It would be, I think it'd be hard for me to leave my current situation if that was the direction we were going to move. I think my wife would have any things to say?
I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. You're all so dedicated and sharp and congenial. Thank you very much.
Okay, the last question I have, we've discussed bonuses and pay and benefits. Obviously, in a municipality, we normally don't do bonuses. We have a salary and then about the only other benefit is a car allowance. If we were able to meet your salary requirements, would that be accepted?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, I understand how municipalities work, and bonuses, it's not part of the system. It doesn't work that way. So I wouldn't dream of that.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, but I will say it's been a pleasure to interview you, and I'm going to go around one more time and see if the council has any other questions, and then we'll take it to a debate. All right. Councilmember Baker, any questions?
No further questions, Mayor.
All right. Councilmember Zabel?
No further questions, Mayor.
All right. Jody Shirley?
No further questions.
Councilmember Roberts?
No, sir.
Councilmember Otero?
No?
Vice Mayor Gunn?
Thank you. No.
All right, it sounds like we are ready to enter the discussion phase, so that we don't feel like we're staring you down while we're talking about you. I'm going to ask you just to have a seat out in the hall. You'll be able to hear what we're discussing, and I'll call you back in whenever we're ready to take the vote. Before we get started with discussions, I'm going to need a motion to take a vote for our single candidate. Do I have a motion?
So I move that we take a vote for the single candidate.
All right, motion made by Lloyd Roberts. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mike Zabel. Mr. Roberts, you have the floor.
We did have an opportunity, as Mike mentioned earlier, to, I apologize for that, PP, you're not going nuts, it's my insulin pump. But, so we did spend some time, significant time, with Ken at another interview process. He did very well then. I think he did exceptionally well tonight. I'm confident that he can do the job. I really appreciate the fact that the skill sets that he brings to the city, if we select him, and from a standpoint of having hands-on and potentially actually doing some of the engineering services himself, as well as if we do decide to outsource some of the engineering services, his ability to overlook what they deliver to us will be phenomenal. So I think he's the right guy.
Thank you. Councilmember Notaro.
I have a problem with the salary range, and we're hiring a city manager, we're not hiring an engineer. And I think that seems to be his strength as an engineer.
Any other comments?
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Baker.
I have like 3 problems, and I don't know if they're petty or not, but this, as the one council member brought up about being able to get on Zoom, he couldn't get on Zoom last week. I have a big problem with that. I'm not a computer guy, but I know how to get on Zoom. The other problem I have is the thank you letter he wrote. He misspelled our mayor's name. That, you know, that's simple research. When you're trying to be hired on that, the chief officer that you're being interviewed with, you don't spell the name. Second of all, his county work on Williams County, it's 2015 to 2016. Did he start in December and quit in January? You know, that's a very short time. His salary range is something that we've all said no way we were going to even discuss and debate. He does bring in these grant opportunities, which I don't think they're gonna fit the city at all. We're already getting grant money in that for flood that Lynn already achieved in that. I don't think there's much more to be found out there. But that's my input.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Zabel.
Looking at, again, going all the way back to the resumes, and after talking with him, he not only brings the engineering, but the leadership. I mean, he basically built a program for engineering leadership. And he's correct. The engineering, when you're working at it, you know, as I've done it, it's, you don't break out a slide rule. Those are very special people that you keep off to the sides. What happens throughout your career progression, and he's at that phase, is you're a leader. You have people that actually break out the slide rules. And the slide rules are really only that first 5 years. After that, you're overlooking budgets, you're overlooking development of people, you are looking at the big picture. If you're not, you're no longer there. As a consulting engineer, that's what you do. You look at the big picture, you lay out the plan. If you're not laying out a productive plan, you're not going to get hired because that's contract work. So, looking at all the other candidates, frankly, this is a very strong candidate, and I can't emphasize enough just how much qualification and experience he brings to this city. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shirley.
So I just have to question, are we in such support of this candidate because he's the last man standing? And I go back to, have we really taken this process seriously? Have we talked to the right candidates? Have we got the correct candidates in front of us? I'm just gonna kind of leave that out there. So, something to think about. There are some concerns on salary, but, you know, I think I would consider that something we can overcome if it's the right person. Not sure that he's the right person. There's some things in the background check that I don't want to say in a public forum, but if you look at page 4, you can see some history that brings a lot of concern to my mind.
We have the information in front of us, and as I went over earlier, I have no problems discussing difficult topics. Would you please reiterate?
He's going to be running our budgets. There's several delinquencies. I don't want to expound anymore. If you can't read it, I don't know what to say. You know, you all should have the ability to read these reports. So if, I'm just going to say, I would be in favor of going back out to the community, hire a professional to help us seek a city manager that can meet the needs of our city.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Gunn.
I think he's very articulate, well-spoken. I think he's got a lot of qualifications that we can use. I'm not concerned about the salary. I think you are making an investment, and if he brings a return on that salary, which I have some level of confidence that he will, then we're for the better for that. At the end of the day, a city manager serves at the pleasure of the city council. And obviously, we have an opportunity to judge and weigh that performance I'll be the first person to say it's easier to hire than it is to fire, but with that said, we still have the ability to observe and move on from there. Again, I'm not concerned about the salary. I think he's well qualified for the job. I like what I heard tonight, and I think there will be a good return on the investment.
Thank you. What I see is I see a potential to correct some problems that the city has had with capital projects. I have always felt that they have not been completed in a timely basis. I feel like this city deserves better than what we have done in the past. And that is not that's not saying anything of negative about people that are currently handling those projects. I just think that with someone of this caliber of experience, those projects could very well happen much faster, and our city would benefit in ways that we've not seen in a long time. Also, Councilmember Shirley questioned the hiring process. So you're not the first person who's brought that up. The Citizens Advisory Committee also questioned the hiring process. However, after the Zoom meeting that we had with the 4 candidates, I had 2 Citizen Advisory Committee members come up to me, and I think one of them even spoke publicly that said, actually the process worked out better than I expected, and I think that we narrowed it down to 2 very impressive candidates. Unfortunately, one of those candidates decided to take another position closer to home, and I don't blame them. So I feel like the process has actually worked. Now, there has been a suggestion that we should scrap this and hire a headhunter. Well, if anyone here has used a headhunter service, I think the going rate is about 20%. Well, there's your first year of a salary increase that we're debating on whether we would consider hiring this guy for that salary. So one way or the other, the city would be spending the money with a headhunter, spending the money with Mr. Griffin, or we would completely start the process over again and go right back through the Citizens Advisory Committee with the exact same process again. So I have, my feelings is that Mr. Griffin would be a worthy investment for our city. I think that this may not be a long-term engagement. I can't guarantee that he would want to stay around, but I see that there are many projects that he would be very useful to our community, and I would have no problem hiring him. Now that we've all spoken one time, let's go to the public for comments. Would anyone like to speak?
Hey, Mayor, Council, agreed. Councilmember Zabel, the comment that a lot of people put a lot of effort in this process, I totally agree with. A couple things, I did present to you my personal feeling earlier on that should scrap the process and get a recruiter. I still feel that way, very strongly. I feel that what I'm hearing tonight is we're putting a square peg into a round hole. So we found an engineer that could be very beneficial for our city, but is it a city manager? And I don't think we found a city manager that fits ultimately what I think our city should have. After the discussions over budget that I've observed everybody on to feel that it's okay to put a 40% increase into the salary, when I think some of the comments were, who wouldn't want to work here for 100 grand early on. I think we really need to formally know what the right salary range is, and then not settle for a warm body. And to me, that's just what it feels like from my perspective. And I didn't go on record first, but Ron Zaganik, 2219 and on.
Thank you very much. Any other citizens? Yes, sir, Mr. Davis.
Rudy Davis, 612 Belle Isle Avenue. First thing I want to say is how absolutely wonderful it is to sit here and listen to this council with its broad base of knowledge, go through calm deliberation, very thoughtful process. It's just wonderful to hear, given what I listened to for the last 3 years. Thank you. As noted, I've been on 3 city manager selection committees. The process a lot of times is what's available at the time that you're in need. I think there's no question that this gentleman has the skills. Having been an assistant administrator in Hillsborough County, he's got that political background. He's dealt with it. He spoke very clearly on how he would work with you and the residents, and that's important. The hang-up seems to be, is he perfect for us? Think of our size and the number of people that even would want to apply here. And look at what you've got in front of you. For, I don't know, maybe I'm going to throw a number out there, $35,000, $40,000 over where you'd like to be, maybe less, 25. He can easily save you that money. It harkens back to the first city manager that we ever selected, Reed Silverboard. We were fortunate that he came to us for what the salary was, because he wanted to be here. But it wasn't long before 1 year when people saw the value of his experience and knowledge, and Treasure Island bought him away from us for a significant salary. It was, I think, $30,000, $40,000 more than what we were paying. Inflation is a new era. It's time to step up. Very carefully, you can pay this salary, but very carefully set a plan where you can justify to the residents of the city that you paid that price because he saved you the difference in the money. Make that a strategic part of your strategic plan. And just final note, this city has never put down a good, solid city manager evaluation program. And that needs to be in place, because you can't let him work for a year and then come back and, based on your own particular whims, start judging him. You set the plan first. Say, these are our objectives. These are what we're going to score you with, and on. And then at the end of that year, you use that as your blueprint for making a judgment. I am so pleased to hear that you're going to put in effect, or you're interested in putting into effect, a plan to bring Kyle more education, more training, more experience, with the objective that down the road, he could be our man. He always has to, stand up to the same process of evaluation as the others that are available, but I don't think we need to go back through this process again. You're not going to find that perfect guy. If you do, he may be out in, middle America somewhere, and what we've got is someone that's a local person, local experience, and that's key to running a beach community. Thanks again for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Yes, sir. Mike Kelly.
Mike Kelly, 2740 Hibiscus Drive West. I'm not going to dwell on the salary debate. You folks have analyzed it, you've looked at it hard, and if you choose this person And if it comes down to be a salary issue, that is your choice, and I'll back you what happens. My concern is this person, whether it's this gentleman tonight or anybody else that you ultimately hire, going to be able to work in the trenches? I'm calling it that because people like Kyle and Lynn and past people that have worked in the city have to be able to work with our citizens who, I won't say unfortunately come in, but you know that at the counter there's people that come in that want to talk to the city manager. And even if you've got a project going, you've got to make time to come to that counter and do it. So the person you hire should be somebody that can get out of his ivory tower and come to that counter and make that person comfortable, or make an appointment, or delegate Patty or someone to have that person come back. Because your 2,000 citizens want to be able to get in and talk to our new leader. And that's so, so important. If a person who has a terrific salary, terrific credentials, can't interact with this small community and be able to jump in his truck, I hope, as opposed to whatever, and go see somebody at their house with their issue that is a administrative problem or an administrative concern to that citizen, that person is going to start to fail to keep the respect of our local citizens on a regular basis. And that is a factor in who you choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Any other comments? All right, let's go back to the council, and we will give Lloyd Roberts the last word.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a comment made, are we just taking this person because they're the last person standing? I believe, Patty, we started with what, 23, 28? 28 applicants. So certainly we're not taking the last person standing. We had 28 to begin with. Then we narrowed that down to 4, and then we narrowed that down to 2. One of those found another job, therefore leaving us with this individual. So we started with 28. There's a lot of work put into it. We're not just accepting somebody because they're here. Using a recruiting consultant, I've had some experience in that area, actually a lot. And normally, what happens with that is you hire this firm to come in, and Dave referenced about $20,000. Typically, that consultant puts together a really nice package, which is why it costs so much money. And they're attempting to lure people that are currently working at a lower salary than what you're going to offer. And that's why you're doing this. So you're not going to lure them typically away from their current job using a recruiting consultant by offering them less money than what they're currently making. It doesn't work that way. So that particular tool has a specific niche, and I don't think our city fits in that niche to use a headhunter recruiting consultant tool for that. And I think it's a shame that sometimes we're trying to say this individual has too much engineering experience, and we're using that against him. He has an ICMA certification. It doesn't get any stronger than that. He has county leadership experience, not a specific city manager, but he has a county administrator position. He's got the experience in that area as well. We shouldn't penalize this person because he has a strong engineering background. That's an additional positive thing that he brings to the table. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gunn.
Well, I'm sorry, you jumped straight to Lloyd. Would it be out of the question to alter the structure of this process just a little bit to bring Mr. Griffin back in to address Ms. Shirley's issue and Mr. Kelly's issue? Because I'd like to close the loop on this. I think all the stakeholders need to be comfortable with these issues and the decision we're about to make. So my question in the process is, could we bring him back in here for about 5 or 10 minutes to address the issues that Ms. Shirley brought up? And I'd like to address Mr. Kelly's question.
will allow that.
Can I just say one other thing is just, and it's been mentioned a couple of times, and these were Mr. Griffin's words exactly, was that Kyle will not have to wait that long. I mean, it seemed as though he intended this to be a short stay. It's very expensive to bring someone on, a new hire. Onboarding is expensive and costly to get him up to speed. If he's coming in with that mindset, it just brings him to concern.
Why don't we bring him in and let's ask those questions. Mr. Griffin, would you please come back in, sir? Did we chase him off?
I can see him right there.
He's gone.
The council has a few more questions for you, Mr. Griffin. Would you mind stepping up to the podium, please? Let's start off with Jody Shirley.
Okay, just a couple of questions. When you were asked about mentoring Kyle, your words were, Kyle will not have to wait that long. And my concern is it's very costly for us to go through the process of onboarding a new hire. There's a lot of expense and a lot of time involved. My concern is that you're looking at this as a short-term stay based on that reply.
Good question, and I had a funny feeling that I didn't phrase that properly when I did say it. In fact, I was thinking about it out there. I didn't hear your discussions, by the way. I'm looking at 5 to 10 years, working another 5 to 10 years, staying in this capacity. And yes, I recognize that. And it takes that kind of time to get the things done that you want to get done.
This question is not as easily posed. Patty, do you have a copy of the background check that Patty provided us with?
I cannot.
If you have an extra copy, can you give him page 4, just because I don't want to, page 3 and 4. I don't want to, So on these pages, you can see there's several accounts that had multiple delinquencies. And my concern is, as you know, running a budget for a city, credit means a lot. And so I'm just concerned about how many delinquencies in that time period, when you clearly indicate you were gainfully employed and the wife was employed, and so just kind of curious about that.
All of those items are fully up to speed now. Many of them, in fact, are fully gone whatsoever, paid in full. I have no delinquencies, not late on anything, current on my mortgage.
Okay.
I think my credit rating is quite good.
Yeah, I don't know how you have 90, 120 days, things like that, so I'm just wondering how that happens, but that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Vitaro, yes.
Yes, I think you said that you looked at this as being a 5 to 10 year situation. And looking back at your employment history, you were in King William County from 2015 to 16, Town of Smithfield from 2014 to 15, Hillsborough County 2006 to 2011, a 5-year, a 1-year, and a 1-year.
But those were actually those were actually 2-year engagements. And as I indicated, I encourage my wife to take the opportunity that was offered. They heavily recruited her. It's truly a wonderful firm for her to join, practice to join. And I said I would get as close to you as I could as soon as I could. I didn't realize maybe how difficult that would be. It did require a number of changes until I finally was able to get right there to Virginia. So that's what's required. But as you say, prior to that, I certainly was with Hillsborough County almost 6 years. I was with the large agency in Mississippi for 13 years. And prior to that, earlier in my career, long engagements as well.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Good.
Dr. Griffiths, one of the residents brought up an issue about accessibility. One of the strengths of your possible predecessor, Lynn Reeves, was he was always accessible, highly personable, extremely adept at customer relations and service to the community, always accessible. And he wasn't afraid to roll up his sleeves and engage when it was an all hands on deck kind of evolution. And we just want to know, maybe you can touch on some experiences that would give us confidence that you're also that sort of person.
Yeah, excellent question. Yeah, that's the way that the job gets done well. It's with connections. It's with listening. It's with taking to heart, bringing opportunities and challenges and potential solutions to you, and then moving forward and addressing those concerns. I'll give you a good example. 2 examples. When I was head of the agency for 13 years in Mississippi, we developed 50 communities around this 45-mile-long reservoir. And these were communities, each with very active homeowner associations. They met regularly in the evening. Some of them met on the weekends. And I made sure that all 50 of those, I saw all 50 of those once or twice a year, every year for all those years that I was there. And I enjoyed that. And that's how we got things done, because the residents know what needs to be done. The citizens tell you what needs to be done. And you listen, you formulate solutions, you work together as a team, and they help you get things done. And so I'm very comfortable with that. And as you indicated, this is a hands-on job, so that goes hand in hand with that. First-hand listening.
Any other
hands-on.
questions from the council?
Yeah, I actually do, but none of you. Attorney Mora, are you online right now?
Randy?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was trying to get to unmute.
No, I understand. I just want to ask you, have all our questions been legal and reasonable at this point?
I think your questioning has generally been reasonable. Your candidate has been very amenable to answering and responding to the process. It is a difficult process all the same. I'm comfortable with how we've proceeded thus far.
Okay, yeah, a question, because normally in interviews, I don't get into somebody's credit rating. Even security clearances, we tend to shy about that to the last minute.
I think that to the extent the question was attempted to be asked in the most discreet way possible. I understand that point. There is a slight difference in a public entity and public funds and your fiduciary duties in that regard. In a general sense, I prefer we got back to the conversation at hand.
Okay.
I'm not going to start making legal positions for the community.
Nope, thank you very much.
Okay, hold on 1 second, or was that the same?
No, that was it. So Randy, this is Lloyd. I think it was a short time ago we were having a conversation, the council with yourself. You had provided us with some statistics regarding what the normal length of time that a city manager typically stays working for a city. I think it was in the state of Florida. Do you recall that time?
Yes, that wasn't a statistical study done by me, but it was information that I've heard repeated by Florida League of Cities personnel on multiple occasions as I've sat through additional recruitments. My exposition to you was that manager candidates in Florida tend to average historically close to somewhere between 4 and 7, more recently between 3 and 6 years in the community. That tends to do more with political turnover than specific departures, but the circumstances are, each situation is unique to itself. But it is uncommon to have tenures of, 15, 20 years, though I know you might be personally familiar with somebody that's been fortunate to do that. In a general sense, tenures tend to be closer to the 5-year range in municipalities, just because of various circumstances, whether people retire, resign, are removed, or otherwise.
Thank you, Randy. And so going back to Mr. Griffith, when he said 5 to 10 years, that he would feel comfortable if he's selected to go ahead and give us that much time, I think is right on target.
I will tell you that under the ICMA guidelines, their ethical policies typically dictate that they should not take a position for less than 2 years, barring extraordinary circumstances. Things happen, a family member dies, you have to move, whatever. But in a general sense, in the industry, from their professional informal regulations, they tend to say, if you're going to commit to a community, you should commit to be there at least 2 years. As far as his verbal statement that he's willing to work there for at least 5 years if you'll have them. That's in keeping with the general alignment of how long people tend to serve. But again, and none of that is necessarily in stone, as you've noted as a council already. Every manager serves at the pleasure of their council.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you. Any other questions before I release you? Okay, I have one. As you know, things break, things happen, and they don't follow a specific time clock, which means you could get calls in the middle of the night from any resident who just so happens to have figured out what your home phone number is. Are you prepared for that?
I'm used to that. I've gotten long since used to, I sleep with my cell phone, and so I do get calls. Things do happen, and it's always been my job to handle them.
And you would consider that being part of your job?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's somebody has to do it, and I'm the one to do it. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before I send him back out?
No, sir.
All right. Sir, if you don't mind, please step out again. And this time, I'm calling for final comments. And then, Mr. Roberts, if you would wait until everyone else has the opportunity to speak so that you do get the last word. All right. Any comments from the council?
Yes. Addressing the whole thing about hiring a headhunter, frankly, you just kind of go back full circle, and it would cost us an additional 20% just to hire the same person. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would just like to add that I did consult with our attorney before I posed the question, and I was not posing a question about his credit score, but more of looking for an explanation, which was not given. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Frank Baker, do you have any comments?
No comments.
Anyone else? All right. Boyd Roberts.
Let's vote.
Patty, would you please pass out the ballots?
They're up there, Mayor.
Oh, I've got them. You've got them. Boyd Roberts. Yep, got it.
Thank you.
before we get to results, I'd like to remind everyone that this is not hiring this candidate. This would move us into the negotiations phase. Patty?
Councilmember Notaro voted no. Councilmember Roberts voted yes. Mayor Gaddis voted yes. Vice Mayor Gunn voted yes. Councilmember Shirley voted no. Councilmember Zabel voted yes. And is Councilmember Baker holding? Okay, one more. And Councilmember Bankert voted no.
Thank you, Patty. So that is 4 yes to 3 no, which means we can move forward with the negotiation phase. Before we move forward with that, I would like to have a quick discussion with council to decide where we stand on the salary and what everyone's ideas on what would be the best method for negotiating.
Mayor, if I may, while you folks discuss or ponder the salary question, and it has been my experience that you need not necessarily do it this way. I'm happy and prepared to negotiate with the candidate as, based on whatever guidance you're given and work through drafts to ultimately present to you based on my guidance. If that informs the council's thinking at all, I did want to, since I'm not present, to offer any body language or other indication. I wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Thank you very much. And as we all know, he pretty much told us what he was looking for, and I think that it was something that we must have considered, seriously considered, because more people that knew what salary he was looking for and what expectations he had voted to move forward with negotiations. And everyone knows what that salary was, correct?
I would like to see a true copy of W-2 or some accounting data, and I'm going to take it, that's written note on it.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I think somebody had mentioned something previously, and I apologize, my voice got a little cold here. I did test myself twice, not COVID. But a nearby city recently hired a city manager, and we were familiar. I can't recall what that number was. Does anybody remember?
Oh, it was 135.
So it was 135,000. And which city was that?
I can't remember.
Okay, so a nearby city on Gulf Boulevard, 135,000. And as one of the citizens stated earlier, with inflation and different things going on, I know at some point we were looking at a lower number. However, the infamous statement of you get what you pay for weighs a lot. So you're right. We know that we're dealing with, he's currently making 140,000. He said the bonuses are not to be taken into consideration. The city does give a car allowance, right?
Correct.
Car allowance. So that would be effectively added to whatever number, we can back that out, subtract that from 140, come up with a number to say is apples to apples, whatever we think from a negotiating standpoint. And Randy was saying, that he would actually do the negotiating for
We
us?
would actually do the negotiating, and Mr. Mora, the council would still have to approve the negotiated salary, correct?
Absolutely. I would never suggest that I have the ability to contract independently. What I would hope to do is take whatever guidance you give me whatever the candidate's position is, try and reconcile those two into a document that could be presented and say, the candidate is satisfied with the terms memorialized here, the council still has to approve it. And if you tweak it, whether it's because you want to add an allowance for attending a conference, or, a car allowance, or a tech allowance, or any of those sorts of things that you find in, what is the contribution to the retirement plan, I can go by, of course, what I've seen in your past manager's contract and whatever, standard things that are addressed in contracts, like how termination would be handled, et cetera. But I would work towards a draft based on the input of the discussion you're having now. And if there are any intangibles, I would say this was, the candidate offered this, it did not seem unreasonable, or it did seem in alignment. It is for you to consider as a body, but regardless, the candidate will not be hired until this council approves an employment contract, and with all its salient terms.
And that would be, as soon as you had the information, you would notify me, and then we would call another special council meeting to approve the negotiated contract, correct?
Correct. My hope would be to do that in the most efficient fashion, so you don't have to have, I doubt any of you are for want of more meetings, so I would like to have that towards the final product, for your consideration. If it aligns with some other meeting schedule, we can certainly put it as part of that. I know you have some budget hearings come up. If we align with that, great. But yes, in a general sense, it would be a special meeting to consider the terms of the contract and discuss that. And if for some reason this council desires to workshop it, as I know with Manager Reed's departure, there was some discussion about a preference towards workshopping things before we vote on them. While you could amend it at the council meeting, that's ultimately how we proceed is at the discretion of this body, and most specifically the mayor, in as much as the code grants you some additional powers to unilaterally call something as compared to a group decision.
Thank you very much. I think that's a valid point, that you would like to see a W-2, something proving that what his current salary is. I feel very strongly that this money will come back to us. The proof is in the pudding. We'll know quickly. My recommendation would be, provided that he can give us proof of his salary, my recommendation would be to move forward with the 140 and the standard car allowance, which I believe is $500 a month. I believe that's what it is. Is that what we saw in the on the budget? I believe so.
So it is that.
Kyle, can you confirm that?
3,000 per year.
3,000.
3,000. Okay. All right. That makes a lot more sense. So 250 a month. Okay. All right.
Can we add the?
Member Baker has his hand raised, Mayor, on Zoom, and you don't see that platform.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. The council just voted 4-3 to move on to this process, and now we're already questioning his credibility by asking for a W-2 form that we don't trust him already. Another thing is, we talked about salary ranges at workshops for I don't know how long, 2 months. I don't think we were ever going to exceed $110,000. I think it was clearly noted that we had, yes, the taste for champagne on a beer man's budget, but now all of a sudden we're going to be able to come up with the extra money. I'm just totally confused on this.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Vice Mayor Gunn.
I think it's actually a Russian proverb, and President Reagan picked up on it, trust but verify. That's all part of due diligence, is the way I see it. One thing, a possibility also is, Rudy Davis brought it up, we've overhauled evaluations a lot, but there may be some expectations you want to build in ahead during the negotiations. Say, yeah, hey, we think you're worth this. These are our expectations, and these are the things we're going to be monitoring and gauging your performance by.
I like that. Would you like wants to take the lead on
Come up with some solutions. When would you like them?
Mr. Mora, would you say 48 hours is sufficient?
Yeah, 48 hours in terms of, what I heard Member Gunn talking about was review criteria that could be inserted in the employment agreement. I don't expect to have anything in draft until Monday, as I'm going to need to talk to the candidate as well at some point tomorrow. So 48 hours, the difference between Saturday at 10 a.m. and Monday at 10 a.m. is negligible to me. I don't want to create an unreasonable deadline, certainly not for my supervisor in the form of the commission. So at the pleasure of whatever timeline you see fit, my hope would be that we would have a full draft together in a week's time that we can met out whatever details need metting out between now and next Thursday, so that by Friday, hopefully we have a final document based on the time it may take the candidate to produce whatever documentation you request, and my time to memorialize this in the document that you'd be happy with.
I don't think we're in a huge hurry just because he said 2 to 4 weeks, but Vice Mayor, go ahead.
I would say 48 hours might be tight, because what I would ask for is, I can come up with a straw man for some of these expectations, but I would certainly like to put them out there through the city clerk for all the council to look at and kind of review, and maybe you can help me fine tune or add something.
Fair enough.
So, maybe present something to Randy, have it to him first thing Monday, is that good?
That sounds fair enough.
That's fine by me. I have to say this as the council, just because it was a little ambiguous as your legal counsel. As you talk about brainstorming it, if you're going to be brainstorming with your fellow members of the council, that should be done in a public meeting. But as far as you seeking insight from staff, including my office and our experience with other communities, happy to provide that offline. But as far as your other working with your council members on substantive action, that would be more of a open meeting dialogue.
Can I add that maybe we have a meeting Monday, maybe we can reserve an hour before the meeting for a work session?
We can do
Go
that.
over that. But, and I was thinking right along the same lines as Glenn was, but I was going to say, have a 90-day performance and then quarterly sort of benchmark, so we aren't waiting for a year into his, employment to say, oh, we didn't like this, or we weren't doing that right, or we're having just some feedback on a regular basis from us.
And council, I just want to remind you before we get very hyper-technical, and this may be a little premature to state, but as you talk about having benchmarks and the like, the manager does serve at your pleasure. You need not wait till arbitrary points in time to make decisions if someone did not performing to your satisfaction. Of course, you can always give feedback and you can always terminate. I just want to make sure you're clear about it. And I'm a little leery as you talk about setting up tripwires for you, or red lines as they've been described in the national politics, where if he crosses a certain line, it's just sort of your decision is made for you. So as you do work through that, it may be more to develop regular check-ins and sessions as opposed to meet this benchmark or else. But it's something to consider in terms of an employment arrangement.
Thank you very much.
And maybe this is just curiosity, but I'd like to see copies of our former city managers' contracts. Patty, is that something that are in the files somewhere?
Yes.
Okay,
If you would, just please email a copy to everyone on the council.
thank you.
Any other comments?
Randy, have you had an opportunity to see the previous city manager's contract?
I did see it. I worked through it for purposes of the separation agreement.
Okay. Was it, in your opinion, was it a normal city manager contract?
Generally speaking, it was a normal contract in terms of it provided for compensation, separation, termination, and benefits. And that's really what we're going to be looking for. As far as it's hard to say what's normal in terms of compensation because that varies widely by community means, community expectations. In some communities, they provide for, a tech budget, attendance at an ICMA conference, and other things. In some communities are, here's your salary, here's your retirement, here's your health insurance, don't ask for anything else. So in the sense that it has the essential elements, yes, what those elements are, I will shy away from saying what is standard in compensation measures.
Okay. Would it be unusual, in the example I know Mary Gaddis mentioned the number 140, the fact that if we offered the $250 a month car allowance, which equates to $3,000 a year, would it make sense and would it be fair to offer 100, if the number is 140, to offer 137 plus the $3,000 a year car allowance? Would most people think that that's the same?
I wouldn't speak to what's reasonable and fair, as those are sort of intangibles, and my job is to spot for you and not deal in too many adjectives. What I would say is that that is a reasonable negotiation position, and it's not uncommon to take salary and negotiate in that fashion for total compensation and say, we can't get you to number X, but we can provide this. Just as in the litigation sphere, sometimes when we're $5,000 apart, they'll say, okay, I can't come to your number, but what if I just paid a mediator and you don't have to pay your share today? And somebody says, okay, well then that gets me there because that was going to come out of the same pot. So whether or not that persuades the candidate is an entirely different calculus. If that's a hard number for them and they're not looking at total compensation, it may be reasonable, it may be fair in the estimation of some, but it may not get you the candidate you seek. And that's why we want to go through the negotiation process, and why I'm listening intently to this discussion to see, to the extent there's any flexibility in that discussion from the council's direction, where it is and what it is and what if you're not willing to go to certain numbers, what are you willing to do, or what do you consider, are you considering at this stage? Of course, you haven't seen it, but whatever the retirement contribution was made for your last manager, I know your last manager did not receive health insurance through the city, but instead received I believe it was $600 a month stipend to secure his own. That was one term. If you're seeking to move in that direction, does that change the calculus for the candidate? I don't know. So those are the sort of things we're going to have to look at in the negotiations process to say, I don't know what all of his asks are, and in getting those, that may inform what some of your responses are, and that's why it is a negotiations process, and why tonight we're just deciding you have decided to move towards that discussion or dance as opposed to finality.
Okay, so what I would recommend then is we do the work session, as Councilmember Shirley suggested, and we pick up this conversation Monday at 5 p.m. in a special council meeting. And that will happen before the regular council meeting. Is that fair enough? Do you agree with that? Okay, great. Mr. Mora, do you have a problem appearing here at 5 p.m. instead of 6?
I was just checking my calendar, Mayor. I do not.
Okay, great.
I can be there.
All right. Well, I think that ends this conversation. I would like to bring Mr. Griffin back in. I think he heard me this time. No, he did not. Hello again, Mr. Griffin. All right, welcome back. The council has voted to move forward with negotiations. So congratulations on making it through this next phase. On Monday, the council will meet in a special council meeting to set some parameters with the city attorney Mora, and he will be contacting you after that date to begin negotiations and see if we can reach an agreement. Does that work for you?
Yes, sir, that sounds fine.
Okay, great. I would like to thank you very much for making your way out tonight and being put through what we put you through. I don't think it was too bad, was it?
No, it was not. I enjoyed it.
That's great.
You're all very sharp, very congenial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, with that being said, I think that this will conclude this meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion made by Frank Bankert.
Second.
Second by Leslie Nataro. All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.